The folding chair was cold through my tights. 61 degrees outside, colder in that donation room that smelled like bleach and old coats. I was 9 years old, watching taillights pull away through a window with a crack in the corner, shaped like a lightning bolt. My mother's voice was still hanging in the air behind her, flat as a receipt. This is where failures belong. Nobody in that shelter asked me my name for 11 minutes. I counted the clock. I'm going to tell you what happened after that night. Not the part where I cried because I didn't, not then. The part where I built a life so solid that the people who left me there had to come back and ask for a piece of it. Welcome to Calm Revenge Tales, where the quiet ones win. If you believe delayed justice is still justice, subscribe now, because this one takes its time, and it earns every minute. My name is Renata Okafor-Bissell, and by the time I was 34, I owned 3 dry cleaning plants in the Piedmont Triad of North Carolina, the kind with the steam presses that hiss like they're telling secrets. I built the business from a single counter on Battleground Avenue with $4,200. I saved working nights at a hospital laundry, folding scrubs until my hands cracked in the winter. I never took a loan from my parents. I never asked. I didn't have to. Miss Ottoline Prelot taught me how to run numbers before I could legally sign a lease. Miss Ottoline was the woman at that shelter who finally did ask my name, 11 minutes and 40 seconds after the taillights disappeared. She was 68 then, a retired seamstress with hands like folded paper, deep creases that never fully closed. She kept peppermints in her coat pocket and gave me one before she gave me a blanket, because she said fear tastes better with something sweet in your mouth. She wasn't my blood. She became my family inside of 6 months, and she stayed my family for the next 26 years, long after my actual parents remembered they had a daughter. My parents, Delphine and Warwick Okafor-Bissell, treated Miss Ottoline the way you treat a coat check attendant. Present, useful, invisible. When I brought her to Thanksgiving once, years later, my mother introduced her to guests as Renata's help. Miss Ottoline just smiled and said she'd take her coffee black. Thank you. I never forgot that smile. It wasn't hurt. It was patient, like she already knew how this story ended, and was waiting for me to catch up. The call came in March, 11 years after the shelter. My father's 60th birthday. My mother wanted, in her words, the family properly assembled. I almost said no. Then she added the condition that decided it. Bring whoever you want, Renata, but that woman doesn't sit at the main table. We have standards for who represents this family in photographs. That woman. 26 years of Sunday dinners, of stitched hems and steady hands, reduced to that woman. I should have hung up. Instead, I heard Miss Ottoline's voice in my head, the way she used to say it while pressing a shirt collar just right. You don't win a fight by refusing to show up, baby. You win it by showing up dressed better than they expect. So I said yes. I told my mother we'd both come, and I let her assume I meant Ottoline would sit wherever the help sat. I didn't correct her. That was the first crack in the plan I didn't know yet that I was building. The morning of the party, Miss Ottoline pressed her own dress, a deep green wool crepe she'd owned since 1987, and altered every few years to fit. She hummed while she did it, the way she always hummed, low and off-key, a song with no name I ever learned. I noticed she kept glancing at a small tin box on her dresser, one I'd seen 100 times and never opened. Gray metal with a dented corner, the kind that used to hold pipe tobacco. She caught me looking and just said, "Not yet, Renata," and put it in her handbag. I didn't ask again. That was our rhythm. She told me things when the time was right, and the time was never rushed. We arrived at my parents' house in Irving Park at 6:58 p.m. My mother's seating chart was printed on cardstock, laminated, a small monument to her intentions. 22 names. Ottoline Prelow's name was not among them. There was a folding table set up near the kitchen doorway, the kind used for overflow at church potlucks, with 2 mismatched chairs. My mother had placed Ottoline there, along with the caterer's assistant and my cousin's children under 12. Miss Ottoline looked at that table for exactly 3 seconds. Then she straightened her spine. I watched it happen, vertebra by vertebra, like a spool of thread unwinding backward, and she said, quiet enough that only I heard it, "I've sat in worse rooms with better company." She sat down at the folding table without another word, unfolded her napkin, and waited for the salad course like she'd chosen it herself. I sat down next to her. Not at the main table where my name card waited between my mother and my Uncle Desmond. At the folding table. My mother's face did something I'd never seen it do before. Not anger exactly, something closer to arithmetic, like she was recalculating a sum that wasn't supposed to include me. Dinner went sideways at the second course, over a dish of braised oxtail that Ottoline herself had once taught me to make, low and slow for 4 hours until the meat gave up its resistance to the bone. My mother stood to give a toast about family and standards, and the Okafor Bissell name meaning something. Halfway through, my father's business partner, a man named Colston Reeve, leaned toward Ottoline and asked, not unkindly but not kindly either, whether she was part of the catering staff. Ottoline set down her fork. "I raised this family's granddaughter for 26 years, she said. Free of charge, out of love, while some people in this room were deciding she was disposable." The room went still the way a kitchen goes still right before something boils over. My mother's face went the color of old brick. "Ottoline," she said, "I think it's time you helped clear the plates." That was the line that crossed it. Not loud. Delivered like an instruction to staff. I stood up. "She's not staff, Mama. She's the only mother I had after you dropped me at a shelter on Christmas Eve, and told me that's where failures belong." 22 people heard that sentence. 22 people looked at their plates. My mother's hand found the edge of the table, like she needed it to stay upright. "You will not speak to me like that in my own house." "Then I won't speak to you at all," I said. "Ottoline, get your coat." My father finally spoke. 3 words. "Renata, don't overreact." That was all. Not one word in her defense. I did not raise my voice again. I helped Ottoline into her coat, the same wool coat from that Christmas Eve 11 years earlier, patched now at one elbow with thread that matched almost perfectly. My cousin Yolanda half rose from her chair, mouth open, like she might say something. She didn't. She sat back down. I brought the tin. I finally opened it the night before the reading, alone at my kitchen table, the same table where she'd taught me pralines. Inside, a savings passbook from a credit union in Lafayette, Louisiana, opened in 1971. A deed, folded soft at the creases, for 11 acres of land outside Opelousas that had belonged to her family since 1949, and a photograph of a young black woman standing in front of a modest brick building with a hand-painted sign reading Prelot and Sons, Sugar Refining, a business I had never once heard mentioned in 26 years of Sunday dinners. My mother and father showed up to the reading. I don't know why, curiosity, or the reflex of people who assume every room with money in it belongs to them. My cousin Yolanda came too, along with my father's brother Desmond. 12 people sat in a wood-paneled office that smelled like cedar and old paper, waiting for a lawyer named Thibodeau Fontenot to open a folder. Here is what that folder said. Ottoline Prelow's family land outside Opelousas. 11 acres, once considered worthless swamp bottom land, sat, as of that year, inside a rezoned commercial corridor valued at $2.3 million, following the extension of a regional distribution route 2 years prior. The sugar refining business her grandfather built had been dissolved decades earlier, but the mineral and timber rights her family retained on a neighboring 40 acres had been quietly leased to a logging company since 1994, generating royalty payments that Autoline had never spent, never touched, and never mentioned. Payments that had compounded, in that credit union account, to $184,000. The room did the arithmetic before the lawyer finished the sentence. My mother's hand went to her chest. That woman, she said, that woman again even now, was catering. She said she was help. She said she'd take her coffee black, I said. You're the one who decided the rest. Mr. Fontenot continued. Autoline Prelot's will, drafted and notarized 14 years earlier, left the entirety of her estate, the land, the credit union account, and the royalty rights, to Renata Okafor-Bissell, who gave me a family after mine had already given me everything they had to give, and who never once asked what I was worth before deciding I was worth loving. My father made a sound I'd never heard him make. Something caught between a cough and a word that never finished forming. My mother stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor, and said too loud for the room, "This is absurd, this woman had no right," and then stopped herself, because Mr. Fontenot was already sliding a second document across the table, the original 1949 deed, my mother's own eyes catching on a signature line she recognized without wanting to. A Bissell family notary seal from decades earlier, on a completely unrelated document, revealing that my mother's own grandfather had once tried, and failed, to purchase that same 11 acres from Autoline's family for a fraction of its worth, back when land owned by black families in that parish was routinely undervalued and pressured out of hands that had earned it fair. My cousin Yolanda went very quiet. Her face did something I recognized, the particular stillness of a person realizing they'd laughed along with a cruelty they were only now understanding the weight of. She looked at the folding table she'd once watched Autoline sit at without objection, and she looked at her hands, and she said nothing, which was, in its own way, the loudest thing anyone said all afternoon. I spoke last. I didn't raise my voice. I set the tin box on the table between us, the dented gray metal catching the office light. She kept this her whole life, I said. Not because it was worth anything to spend, because it was insurance, the kind you earn, not the kind you buy. She told me that once and wouldn't explain it. I understand it now. She wasn't protecting money. She was protecting the proof that she mattered, in case anyone ever tried to tell her different. I looked at my mother. This is where failures belong, you told me at a shelter on Christmas Eve, when I was 9. You were half right. This is where failure belonged. It just took 26 years to show up in the right room. Nobody in that office corrected me. I didn't sue my parents. There was nothing to sue them for. The money was never theirs to begin with, and Autoline's will was ironclad, drafted by a lawyer who'd apparently seen exactly this kind of family before. What I did do was donate 40% of the royalty income to a scholarship fund for kinship caregivers in Guilford County. People raising children who aren't their blood, the way Autoline raised me. I named it the Prelot Fund. It's given out $310,000 in tuition assistance over the past 3 years to 11 families who needed somebody to say they weren't disposable. My mother called once more in December, 14 months after the reading. She didn't apologize. She asked carefully whether there might be a place for family and how I used the land. I told her the offer stood exactly where it always had. She was welcome at my table, the real one, the one with enough chairs for everyone. The day she could say Adeline's full name out loud with respect in her mouth instead of that woman. She hasn't called since. That door isn't locked. It's just waiting on her. The way I once waited on a curb that never came back for me. My father sends a Christmas card every year now, signed only with his name, no message. I keep them in a drawer. I haven't decided yet if that's forgiveness or just paperwork. Maybe it doesn't have to be decided today. I still run the 3 dry cleaning plants. I built a 4th location 2 years ago, on the corner of Freeman Mill Road, half a mile from Adeline's old apartment, and I hung her photograph, the one from outside the sugar refinery, taken decades before I was born, above the register, where every customer sees it first. Some mornings I still hum that nameless tune while I'm pressing a collar, the one she never told me the words to, and I've stopped needing to know them. Some things you inherit whole, without translation. Every Christmas Eve now, at 6 p.m., I set an extra place at my table, not out of grief, but out of practice, the way she taught me. Love is a discipline you keep even when the person is gone, especially then. Last December, I served pralines to 11 kids from the Prelo Fund and their families, in a kitchen that smelled like burnt sugar and butter, and one of them, a girl about 9, the same age I'd been on that curb, looked up at Adeline's photo above my mantel and asked who she was. I told her. She's the reason I know I was never a failure. She's the reason you're not one either. The girl smiled with a mouthful of praline, and for a second, I swear, it was Adeline's smile looking back at me. If this story moved you, here's what I'm asking plainly. If there's someone in your life who chose you when they didn't have to, call them today. Not next week. Today. Tell them what they built in you. And if you know a kid sitting on a curb somewhere, physically or otherwise, waiting on taillights that already left, be the person who finally asks their name. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment and tell me who your Adeline was. And subscribe so the next story finds you when you need it. I'll see you in the next one.